DraftSociety.com presents a Premier League Draft Fantasy Podcast. Welcome to the Key Pass Collective. Your exclusive source for the information, analysis, and advice you need to dominate your fantasy leagues. Come on in. We've been expecting you.
What is happening, draft heads? Welcome back to the Key Pass Collective. My name is Joe Williams. I'll be your host for this here episode. The Key Pass Collective, of course, is the audio companion to the DraftSociety.com. If you're new to this draft game and just stumbled onto us, well, the Draft Society is your go-to for game week prep, stats, rankings, advice, and a whole bunch more in season. We get you ready to basically go out there and just destroy your competition week in and week out. But right now, we are in preseason mode. We're in draft prep mode. So we've just launched the largest draft kit that basically this game has ever seen. That is over on the DraftSociety.com. Check that out. We actually have our consensus rankings coming out tomorrow, which we are incredibly excited about. Consensus rankings from 7 different Draft Society analysts. The top 75 of those are going to be completely free, as well as free positional rankings. And then if you want the full 150 that is sortable by analyst, sortable by position, etc., well, then you can get the draft kit. Check it out. We really do think it's absolutely worth it, and you're supporting an independent fantasy football site. So get yourself prepped to dominate your draft. We have a very special episode today. We have, as usual, we have our friend Totti. So let's go ahead and check in with him and see how he's doing, and we'll kind of get the lay of the land on Totti. My Hungarian brother, how you doing, my friend?
I'm very good, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this weekend when I'm gonna do my yearly sabbatical from the Draft Society as I go on to a sailing weekend with my best mates here in Hungary. So I'll probably be off socials for the time.
Understandable. Sounds like a blast.
But it's gonna be fun. And until then, meaning now and tonight and tomorrow at work, I'll be churning some articles that will be published during the weekend and in the early parts of next week. So it's all Draft Society.
Yeah.
Stuff happening.
Nice. I love it.
I just wanted to add and we don't do a lot of shameless plugging of our subscriptions, and that is I think it's a conscious choice. Is it a conscious choice, Joe? I mean, it's a conscious choice.
Yeah, I think so.
But I just looked through our this season's subs and it's just mind blowing how the communities has decided to support us in our endeavors, and we'd like to extend our gratitude towards them. Also, as much as last season we might have marketed maybe ourselves as gain an advantage by subbing to the Draft Society.
Right.
As I'm looking at the current numbers, there will be leagues, mostly leagues that are organized on socials, on Twitter or on Discord, that will have so many people subscribed that you shouldn't subscribe to get ahead. You should subscribe to keep up.
Oh no. This is the point we're at now, huh?
it looks like. I mean, we are on the precipice of 300 subs. Today is the 13 days.
Yeah, just amazing. So amazing. Yeah, community, thank you so much for just supporting us and encouraging us in what we do, and for the most part having nothing but kind words to say, even if it's constructive criticism about our product. And so we really appreciate that, just like more than you know. So yeah, thank you. Okay, let's move it along. So aside from you, Totti, we also have another guest on today's show, and he is back with us for the third time, which is saying a lot for a special guest. We don't normally get special guests back on that many times, but when you keep churning out content the way that these guys are, I mean, what are we going to do? We got to have you back on. So for the third time, we have Chris from Overthinking Football. Chris, how have things been since we spoke last?
I'm doing great. I just wanted to warn you, if you have me on too many more times, I'll have to officially become a co-host.
Okay.
So if you don't want that and your listeners don't want that. But no, I've been great. I'm currently on vacation. I'm up in the Boston area, enjoying the sun and enjoying being on the podcast with you guys again.
Nice. Very cool. Now, is that where you're from?
No, so I live in Philadelphia,
okay.
The greatest city in America.
Sure. Absolutely. I've never been there, but I'm happy to agree.
Well, you have to come visit then.
I certainly will. Yeah, my funny story, actually, my wife was there when they won the World Series, and was there for, like, you know, people setting cars on fire and doing all that kinds of crazy stuff. So that's her memory of Philly. Like, not necessarily a good one, but also not a bad one. She said it was fun, interesting, and exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is the most passionate fan base I've ever experienced in America, and they can be prickly, but when they celebrate a title, it's like nothing else.
Love that. Love that. Well, what have you been up to otherwise, aside from just vacationing?
Well, obviously working on the blog stuff.
Yeah.
I'm also working at school, trying to finish up my studies, which hopefully I'll finish in the next year or so.
Nice.
So excited for that, kind of hitting the closing stretch of this whole experience. So that's been great.
Very cool. Remind listeners what your doctoral program is.
I study genetics, so nothing to do with modern football, but it's been really cool. It's a really cool area of biology. So it's been really awesome. Very, very cool stuff.
Love that. Well, cool. All right. Well, okay, let's get into it. People are obviously, waiting with bated breath. So you might know the Overthinking Football guys because, they created the expected fantasy points metric, like literally created it. Or maybe you know them because they literally created the WAR metric, the wins above replacement metric. Or maybe even you know them because of their quality starts metric that Totti's been banging on about for the last couple weeks.
I'm in love with quality
You are
starts.
obsessed.
I have to forcefully make myself not put it in every paragraph of my team previews.
I have to say I've read edited a couple of your pieces before publishing, and I think everyone so far has had at least one mention of quality starts.
That is awesome.
Yes, I mean, I have failed. I've failed in my forceful.
But I haven't read all your pieces, so
I have failed. I'll tell you that I have failed. I've used them in every one of the articles.
I love it.
It's such a good metric.
It's really good.
That is so great to hear, honestly. Because I sort of mentioned this to you on Twitter and DMs, but I really feel like that really went under the radar for a long time.
Really did.
And it's definitely something that we use a lot internally. And when I'm in leagues, it's a really great stat to just really quickly see, has somebody been doing well consistently, or is it just a one-off? So yeah, it's awesome to hear that you're using it, and I'm thrilled to hear that. Love the enthusiasm.
Well, damn it. We probably should have had another podcast on quality starts, shouldn't we?
Should have.
That's my fault.
That would have made this one the one where Chris becomes one of the hosts.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely.
It's in my contract.
Well, maybe we got to get you at least a t-shirt or something at this point, because it's just been, at this point, it's too on the nose. You might as well be a part of the team. Anyway, okay. So all of those things that they, pioneered, that's not what we're here to talk about, because they've got something new that they've been working on, and many listeners will already know what that is. But Chris, let's get into it. Tell us about your new venture, your new project, the new, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Interactive product you've been working on.
Yeah. So this is an idea that we had maybe a month before the last season ended. And we've never really done that much specific draft prep work. So all of our stats are very much in-season stats. And yeah, they can all definitely be used to try and make projections to new seasons.
Yeah.
But they're all pretty much retrospective looks at how is a player actually done on the field. So everybody's always making rankings. And we were thinking, it would be great to sort of try and break into the ranking game and see if we could bring a new, different perspective into how this is all done. So essentially the product that we created is an applet that I'm sure a lot of you have already seen. It's essentially an applet that helps you create your own personalized ranks. And also, while we collect all the personalized ranks, we can also use that data to then create consensus rankings that are spread across the entire community, to sort of get a gauge of how the community as a whole is valuing players rather than individuals specifically.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So there's a lot there to unpack. Let's start with just kind of like talk us through the actual process, like from the user's standpoint. What does it look like, and what's kind of like the 30-second sort of step by step? How are listeners going to go in and make their own rankings?
Sure. So the basic idea is, we think of it similar to like Tinder, like a dating app, essentially. So what we're trying to do is...
Now that you say that, yes, absolutely.
So we should really have pictures of the players, honestly, if that weren't illegal to do. So essentially, if we can collect enough matchup data, so... the classic way that people create personalized ranks is you take a list of like 175 players or 200 players, and you just try and sort that into some coherent order.
Right.
As anybody who's actually tried to do that, while it's certainly possible, it takes a ton of work.
Yep.
And it's not really that fun.
No.
So the first 10, 15, 20 players, like maybe that's a good time because you're excited about it. But if you're trying to differentiate, say, the 40th best player from the 50th best player, it starts to get tedious, let alone, say, the 125th player from the 145th player. It's not always super straightforward, the exact rank order you want people to be in. That being said, if you only have 2 players to rank against one another, if I give you a list of 2 players, it's usually not that hard to come up with a good ranking of just 2 people.
Right.
So if I take 2 players and I say, okay, well, which of these 2 players do you actually prefer? And I do that for enough 2-player matchups, I can then, under the hood, sort of use some statistics to try and figure out what the true ranking is underlying all those individual matchups. So an analogy I kind of like to make is to NCAA March Madness. So there's a whole lot of college basketball teams, but they don't all play one another. And so they need some sort of way to use the transitive property to say, okay, well, team A played team B and team B played team C. Well, what does that mean about team A versus team C? Mm-hmm. So you can basically infer what a ranking should be, even if you haven't seen every possible matchup. And the reason why that's important is because with 175 players, there's like 20,000 individual matchups that you would need to do if you really wanted to do every single one. While I enjoy the app, I like the app, I don't think anybody is willing to do 20,000 matchups. So by looking at a subset of those matchups, we can then come up with a pretty accurate ranking for an individual person.
Right. So to give listeners like a picture in their minds, when he says Tinder, like legitimately, it's basically 2 players next to each other in boxes, in like rectangles, right? And they're pretty. It's color coded and everything, but they're in boxes, and it says the player's name, position, etc. But then under that, for each player, it has a series of statistics, and where these players measure in these statistics. So what are you giving, like what data are you giving users?
Yeah, so we did a lot of beta testing with a lot of esteemed members of the community, which we're very grateful for their help. And the goal was to give them enough statistics that they wouldn't need to leave the page and look stuff up, but not so many numbers that it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So we picked a selection of stats that we thought were most valuable in evaluating two different players. So we included expected fantasy points, WAR, quality starts. So of course we're going to use all the statistics that we made up, but also things like points per start, ghost points per start, number of goals, the non-penalty XG, number of assists, and then the XA, number of clean sheets, position. So pretty much all the major statistics you might want to use if you're trying to evaluate two different players. And so, yeah, we just calculated that for every player. And on the matchup page, you can see those stats for both players and then compare them using that.
Yeah. And so you do, is it 1,000?
Yeah.
So you do 1,000 and
exactly.
Then you have your rankings.
Yeah. So it's a little nuanced here. So we basically think that you need to have a certain amount of data or else you really can't trust the rankings because we just don't have enough information from an individual person. So that's where the 1,000 number kind of comes from.
Yeah. We
think that with 1,000, your rankings won't be perfect, but they'll definitely be a long way towards getting a ranking that is actually personalized to you. So we sort of think of the process as two phases. So there's phase one, which is to initialize your rankings. So if you do 1,000 matchups, you'll get a pretty decent initialization of your rankings. But something that's perhaps gone a little under the radar is the second part, which is essentially if you continue to make rankings to do matchups, the rankings will be updated using something called ELO. So ELO is a pretty famous ranking method used in chess most famously. And essentially, you can then live compute players' essentially scores, ELO scores, given the matchup data. So think of it as like wins and losses. Every time a player wins against somebody, he gains some points and the losing player loses some points.
Oh, nice.
So after the first phase of like 1,000, you'll get this initialized ranking and initialized ELO score. And then as you do more rankings, the rankings will right away update. You don't need to wait for anything to happen. It immediately updates, calculates a new ELO score given the matchup data. And then that then allows you to get this dynamic ranking that changes over time with more matchups. Because what's ultimately really important here is that the rankings aren't static. They change over time when players get transferred in, transferred out, get hurt, new managers, things like that.
Yeah, that was one thing I noticed when I did mine was that a lot of the newer players who weren't even in Fantrax, but the ones that were confirmed were already in your ranker. And I was like, oh, this is great because I hadn't even thought about some of these players yet. And it was nice to kind of just start at least sort of exploring my thoughts on these new players and how they were going to do. So that was cool.
Yeah, thanks. We try basically as soon as we feel like a transfer is official. So if they've been here we go, then we tend to, as soon as possible, add them into the system and put them where we think they approximately should go in the ranking.
Yeah. Totti, have you done this?
I have been one of the lucky beta testers.
Oh, okay.
I haven't gotten to my my 1,000 yet, but yeah, I've seen the end results page.
Yeah.
When you killed the big boss at the end.
Nice.
But yeah. So I mean, we as listeners might know or might have seen already when they get this in their ears that we will be releasing our own consensus ranks tomorrow on the 14th.
Yeah.
So I'm planning to use the second part of what Chris said, the updates parts of this ranker to help me with the weekly update that we're planning for our consensus ranks. So,
oh, nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it will help a lot. Also, Chris, let me ask you two questions. One is, it does seem like you, when you open your draft room, you are overwhelmed with having a lot of windows open around your browser or your phone, and this one is just another window that you need to have open to see your own personalized ranks. Is it?
Well, so you can upload these rankings directly into Fantrax, which is really nice. So once your rankings have been initialized, we include, thanks to DraftLad, DraftLad's hard work getting these names right, but we include the Fantrax names and teams in the spreadsheet that we export. And you can just go to the upload feature in the Ranked Players tab on the Fantrax website, and it just uploads your ranking as if you can manually set it.
Yeah, so you can, before minutes before you start drafting, you just go on your ranker site, download your personalized ranks, and then upload them into Fantrax, and then you'll see your queue, essentially, or not your queue, but the list of players you have in the middle of your draft page will be ranked based on your own personal ranks that you have done through your ranker app, right?
Yep, exactly.
And you can use that as your auto draft as well, if you happen to have some issues with your draft day experience.
Totti, I have a feeling that you might have known the answer to those questions before you asked them.
I had an idea.
Okay.
But it's always good to confirm,
No, I love that, actually. That's so cool. And by the way, listeners, you just go to, on your Fantrax League, on the top where it says Rank Players, that's where you do it, right there. And you just go ahead and upload it right in there. You hit import on the right-hand side.
Exactly. And it's interesting Totti would ask this question, considering he may have sparked the idea in a DM like 3 weeks ago.
There it is. Now it's all come full circle. All right.
The mastermind.
Also, my other question is, I am too old and
it's true.
very much too monogamous to have used Tinder ever. But
it's amazing.
Wouldn't it be fun to have Tinder more in tune with this ranker app? Like you had two people
at once.
You had your stats.
Oh Lord,
that's the $1 million idea right there.
And then you could compare. I mean,
when I first likened it to Tinder in my mind as to sort of what the general setup would be before the app existed, I got Tinder in my head and that stuck. But to be honest, it's not like Tinder because Tinder only has one person on it. But Face Swap, so the initial Facebook app, was basically this, where there are two images. So if you've seen the Social Network movie, you'll sort of see the same general idea.
It's like a would you rather, essentially.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is where I would like to continue tooting my own horn.
Great.
If you happen to have read or been a part of the community in the old days of 2020, was it, Joe? When we did the first draft kit for Fantrax HQ?
I don't remember that far back.
Yeah. Neither do I.
Yes, I believe it was 2020, yes.
Only for the purposes of this self sort of praising, if you will. I had an article there about how to make your own ranks. And one of the sections in this article was essentially what Chris and his trusty crew at Overthinking Football have managed in a much more sophisticated way.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Well, we could only hope to imitate you, Totti.
Exactly. It's like when the Neanderthals take credit for the Tesla. It's like that.
Exactly. Right.
I may have had something to do with the wheel, so that Tesla is my creation now.
Exactly.
No, but yeah, I mean, I will say this that this tool is making your own ranks a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
Like low key, and I honestly hope that we, as in right now that we're talking about it, and obviously with the number of retweets and plugs and mentions in our articles, we can spread the word and make it a bit more sort of widespread, because it will elevate the draft experience for everyone in the draft community involved. So low key, remember this day.
Yeah, I mean,
when the ranker app was launched.
Yeah, I mean,
thanks, Totty. I appreciate that a lot.
For me, it gives you an added confidence in where you have a player. Like, because I've done my 1,000. I'm on 1,011 right now, and the current question I have on my screen is Cristiano Ronaldo versus Felipe Coutinho. This is an interesting one, isn't it? Anyway, so I'm at 1,011, and one of the things I think for me, it's like it gives you more confidence that your rankings are based in fact, based in numbers, and have like been borne out on the actual pitch, as opposed to just being a gut feeling, which I feel a little bit interesting too, because I did have a strange sort of guilt when I would like go against the numbers. And this is actually a great example. So Ronaldo versus Coutinho, right? With all of the conjecture and everything going on around Cristiano Ronaldo. Yes, he's better in total points. He's better in WAR. He's better in points per start. He's better in expected fantasy points. He's better in quality starts. He's better in goals. He's better in clean sheets. Well, that doesn't mean anything, but he is. Felipe Coutinho is second in basically every category, but I'm about to probably click on Felipe Coutinho. So, Chris, like, how do you recommend users, I guess, approach this whole like gut call / just have a feeling about something, or making a kind of a prediction based upon what you know versus using the numbers and the data specifically?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that most people who followed our work might just assume that I would say, well, just take whoever has the higher numbers every time. But I actually don't subscribe to that. I think that your implicit predictions that you make when you see two players, I really think that shouldn't be discounted. And I think that, the gut feeling that you have about a player and about his competition, you're really making a prediction on a whole bunch of different factors that the numbers aren't necessarily taking into account. I mean, the numbers are exactly how a player did in the previous season, but they're not necessarily 100% predictive of what's going to happen in the future. And that it's dependent on new managers. It's dependent on a change of scenery, different players that they're playing with, different positionings. Yeah. And these are all things that, we all follow the game really closely. And so we all have a gut instinct when it comes to a lot of these factors. And I think that there are players that are obviously better than other players, and then you should pick that player. And usually if a player is obviously better, it's borne out in the numbers. But for me, when players are close, I think about gut instinct. I look at a few of my favorite stats, and if I really can't decide, and pick whoever is the highest and usually expected fantasy points. But yeah, there's definitely room for gut here. And I think what's really nice about this Ranker app is you can do it based on gut. Whereas I feel like when you're just simply putting together a list that you're sorting, I think a lot of times you think, oh, well, I'm expected to have this person in round 1, for instance, or I'm expected to have this person in round 2. And it sometimes makes you subconsciously subscribe to just what everyone else thinks. Whereas here, it's really like you see 2 players. Who would you rather have? Who would you rather draft on your team? And sometimes it's the numbers, but a lot of time it's also, how do I feel about their situation moving forward? And so, yeah, I wouldn't feel guilty about picking the player with worse numbers. I would just enjoy the experience. There's not really necessarily a wrong answer. We don't know who's going to be the best. And if you have a gut feeling about someone, as long as it's not absolutely not supported at all by the numbers, I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, and it makes you, like, in the moment, actually, sort of justify to yourself your positioning on certain players, which, we all have those players, who we have a soft spot for, and it's like, you bump them up, just implicitly you bump them up, and you probably shouldn't, but you just do, and sometimes you do it too much and too far. And so every time you do this in the ranker, you're sort of forced to have that little inner dialogue with yourself, like, am I going to do it again? Am I going to do it again, even though the stats don't bear it out?
Yeah, exactly. I think. Go ahead, Toddy.
And it does keep you honest. Like you would have if you wrote out the ranks just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, then you might have him lower. Like I found it, and I've been vocal about my worries about Reece James's positional choices for the upcoming season, and I found myself when faced with the A or B decision that Ranker app gives you, that I've felt much. It's a much more difficult decision to actually rank him below someone. Whereas, just like Chris said, that if you are writing them out, then I know that I wanna position him in my ranks to like end of second round ish. So I'm not that worried if I have someone higher who I'm not so I'm not feeling so very active about, if you know what I mean.
Right. Like bearish, to use like a stock market term, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like let's see who we like, for example, Raheem Sterling. Like I want to say I could put him at 20, I could put him at 19, I don't have like a distinct feeling yet on where I want to put him, whereas in a real draft setting I know where I would pick Reece James, and that's where I want to have him end up in my own personal ranks for our consensus ranks. And the ranker doesn't let me get off easily on this front.
Because spoiler alert, you're much lower on him than anybody else in the draft society.
I am.
Which people will see tomorrow. But yeah. It's very interesting, Matt.
Yeah, I think you guys both bring up a really good point that as you're going through it, you really need to be honest with yourself and think really hard about specific players. And it's like, well, I think I feel this way about a certain player, but when push comes to shove, is that actually how I'm going to decide on him? I think it was at Cade who made the point that this was before he even received his personalized ranks and just done 1,000. He made a point that he felt like he learned a lot just by going through and doing the rankings, which is sort of what you guys are also describing. So it's really cool to see that, and I totally agree. I mean, I also use the app, and it sometimes makes me question some of my beliefs about players that I had going into it, because I actually like them a lot more than I think I do, or I really dislike them. So it's been a really interesting exercise.
Yeah, at Cade, shout out, man. That guy's been one of our most vocal supporters since absolute ground zero day one of Draft Society. So yeah, just a lot of really insightful things too to say. But I totally agree with you. Chris, let me ask you, like, now that the consensus ranks are out and basically these are, crowdsourced, right? Like you guys don't manipulate the consensus ranks at all. If you're like, oh, well, okay, I know this player, it says he's here, but like, come on, we got to bump him up a few or bump him down a few. Like you're just sending them out as they are, right? Or no?
Yeah, I'm just sending them out as they are.
Okay.
So yeah, the ranks are better with more data. I'm really excited to say that we've had an amazing response by the community. We've had close to 125,000 votes
Insane.
in the Ranker app, which has been awesome, and we're so thrilled. And it feels really special to create something, to sort of have an idea, create something, and then actually see people use it. So that has really meant so much. But yeah, so we have a lot of data about a lot of these players. The problem is as you get deeper into the ranks, you don't see every possible matchup, so there's a lot of variance in ranks. So like,
sure,
the difference between position 10 and position 12 is way bigger than the difference between position 150 and 170. But, that being said, yeah, we don't manipulate anything. We send them out as they are. They're slightly influenced by where these players started off in the initial ranking, but
sure,
for the most part, after 125,000 ranks, like they start to move into the proper positions. So
that's what I wanted to ask. Like two technical questions. How do you make it so that the more outrageous pairings are not appearing? So like I haven't seen Salah versus Che Adams. I haven't seen no, but I mean it might be interesting for our listeners to hear because I guess those pairings don't give you as much info as if you had players that are closer to each other in your ranks.
Yeah, that is exactly right. So I mentioned at the start of the pod that if you were to do every possible matchup, it's like 20,000 matchups or so, and nobody has the time for that. And so the first sort of decision that we made to make this even possible, because we had to bring down the number of matchups that you needed to do to get at least a pretty good ballpark initialization, was, well, for a lot of these players, like we know where they're supposed to be. So like Mo Salah, we know that he's somewhere in the top 5. Some people might be really extreme, but the most extreme you're going to see is like top 10 maybe. So all of these players have an underlying ranking, and we, for the most part, know how the matchups are going to play out for players that have a ranking difference greater than like 15. So if you have a ranking, this is even more true for the top players who we care about the most. So if you're not within 15 ranks of a player in the top 30, like there are going to be very, very few people who are in good faith picking that player over the player that's ranked worse. So essentially how the ranker works is the first 1,000 matchups, we've essentially curated a list of relevant matchups that we think can optimally let us initialize the ranks. But then for every ranking beyond the first 1,000, we essentially randomly select a player. And then the player that they're matched up against, we select a player randomly that's within about 10 to 15 rankings up or down from that position. So if a player's ranked 20th, they'll at best see a player that's like 5th overall, and at worst see a player that's like 35th overall. So it gives us a range of matchups that are maximally informative without giving matchups that are basically not telling us anything.
My other question was a two-parter. One is obviously I think we can continue using the app during the season as well, right? To help us with valuing players.
Yeah, so that's a decision that we have not reached yet internally. So it's not a big fee, but there is a hosting fee in season, and I think, and Drafter Thoughts has also been a major proponent of this in DMs. It would be really, really cool to see essentially an ELO rating that's run throughout the season that is updating the ranks as we go, and so it's essentially, because this doesn't need to be just for the draft, this could be for in-season decisions. The issue with that is, though, you kind of need a lot of votes. The off-season is great because everyone's super excited. Everybody is willing to put in the 1,000 votes to get their personalized ranking. But a personalized ranking in season is not quite as valuable. And with all the changes in valuation in season, it would require a ton of votes to keep it up to date.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're leaning towards taking it offline as soon as the season begins for that reason. And because I don't think, I'm hoping that the community continues to grow. I'm not sure that this season there'll be enough consistent users to keep the ELO at a rating that we think is actually accurate. But yeah, if there's community buy-in, or in future seasons as the community grows and we think that we can actually collect that kind of data and believe in it, then we would definitely keep it running all year long.
Nice. And that is where my second question, or the second part of my initial question, comes in. So during the off season, obviously the app is live and everyone's just plugging along, Tindering their fantasy rankings. But can you, and this is on the spot, so you might not be able to answer this, but can you tell us maybe how many rankings or how many clicks one would need to move a player? Like, for example, we're looking at Raheem Sterling, and we will be talking about soon about the differences, some of the differences between the latest crowdsourced consensus ranks and the Draft Society consensus ranks, and we have Sterling at 18, and the Overthinking Football Ranker app powered crowdsourced consensus ranks have him at 30. And I suspect we will come to the conclusion that this is because people are later or to react, and by just working through these decisions, it is a slower process for him to start moving up. But how, like, from 30 to our rank of 18, how many clicks do you think people need to be putting together for him to be able to move?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer. So ELO, I tweeted a photo of a plot that I made comparing Gabriel Jesus and Richarlison a couple of days ago. And you can sort of see that the rankings will adjust themselves, but there's a lag of a couple of days. So I'm assuming that that's what we're seeing with Raheem Sterling. It's tough to say exactly how many, and part of the reason why is that the internal ELO ranking score that we use, it shifts more depending on how extreme the matchup is. So, for example, if somebody were to compare Sterling and Luis Diaz, who we both have around the 8th spot, that's like a huge gap in rankings. And so if you were to have Sterling beat him, then Sterling would gain a ton of ELO points and move up pretty far with just one vote. But if he's only matched up against people that are in the immediate vicinity of him, and that where the probability of him being better is, not that much that extreme, then it would sort of take a bit longer. So I wish I could ballpark it. I feel like, if he's getting with 20 to 40 votes, he could move up from 30 to 18. Probably something of that, on that order is my guess.
So reminder to people who have already created their rankings to go back in and do some more ranking, because these things change, and obviously players change teams. And if that's happened since you last completed your 1,000 rankings and got your personalized rankings downloaded, then you're going to need to update those before you go into draft day, because a lot of these things have a lot of moving parts. And like Chris said, new players coming into the league. Look at even today, Koulibaly signs for Chelsea, or at least got the here we go. So there's going to be a lot of things that are kind of touch and go, changing, and you're going to need to go in and do some updating of your ranks.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Joe. That's a great advertisement, and it's a great reason for why you should do that. I would recommend that when you finish doing these ranks, or when draft day comes, if you haven't been voting lately, or you've only done 1,000 and haven't touched anything else, it's always worth taking a scan through the ranks and making sure that if there were any major changes, that you do them annually, which hopefully will only be for a small handful of major players. But yeah, always keep that in mind. And we would love for people to continue ranking as much as they can.
Nice. Totti, do you want to go through some more of those players that you were talking about? I'm pretty interested to hear.
Let's do it. Yeah. Okay, so we had Sterling, already talked about him. There is a 12 position discrepancy between ranker ranks and Draft Society consensus ranks, and I suspect that will dwarf quickly. But there's one guy we have even higher than Sterling, who has a big discrepancy, and it is Alain Saint-Maximin. We have him at 14, and the ranker ranks have him at 21. What do you guys think the difference is due to?
It's not going to seem like a lot because it's so early in the rankings, but it is, right? I mean, you're talking almost a difference of a full round here. And so, yeah, that is interesting to me for sure.
I actually feel okay with it. I think that 14 is totally justified. When I look at these rankings, my first instinct is just to ask, like, does this pass my gut instinct sniff test? Like, does ASM at 21 seem okay to me? And it does. Yeah. To be honest, I could definitely see 21 seems like not too low. I wouldn't go much lower than that, but I think people are concerned about the injuries. I think they're concerned about a brand new Newcastle. Maybe they switch things up. I don't suspect that ASM would be a victim of that, but you never know. It's an interesting discrepancy for sure.
I think I'm with you, Chris. Like, if you look at the guys below him, just ask yourself, could you make a case for Darwin Núñez over ASM? Sure. JWP for the consistency factor? Sure. Jared Bowen? Absolutely. Raheem Sterling, Reece James, right? Like, any of these guys, you could easily make the case. So, yeah, he could bump down 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. That's okay. That's an interesting one, Totti. What else you got for us?
Let's go with one that is the other way around, and it is Reece James.
Oh, yep.
The community has him at 14, and we have him at 19. And these are not big differences. Like you guys said, for ASM, you can argue either way. But I think, for example, this Reece James one, I do feel a bit responsible for that, either for putting him so damn low.
You are,
and also for putting the bug of him starting at centre back in you guys' head, because I have been on this since the end of last season, and I must sound like a broken record, but I may have gotten through to you guys.
Well, let's be transparent.
Let's be the community.
Let's be transparent. So Draft Lad does have him at 11, and Ryan has him at 15. So we're not all, and I have him at 17. So we're not all super down on him. It's mainly you and Jeannie, I suppose, has him at 20, but no, it's mainly you and Robbie.
Where do we have him?
You and Robbie 39?
Yeah.
You have him at 39, which is
39.
insane.
Totti, come on.
That's insane, Totti. But you have him at 39, and Robbie has him at 25.
I mean, once Chelsea finally get centre back or two centre backs transferred in, I will have him higher. I'm not hating on Reece James. He's a wonderful player. I just feel that the Todd is doing the transfer dealings, and I'm not that confident. He's very good at high fives, but,
he is
not very good at talking to European leaders of football clubs. I feel we'll see how it goes. I'm not definitely dying on the Reece James CB Hill as long as they sign two first team ready CBs.
Well, they got one.
They have one. I'm expecting one more, although Koulibaly and Ake are no Koundé and De Ligt.
No,
I will tell you that. But yeah, I mean, both of these guys are already day one. I will probably still have Reece James a bit lower than everyone else, but he's definitely creeping into second round if they sign two centre backs. That's no question. It's just a numbers game. He's no competition at right wing back. But we're talking too much about Reece James. Let's move on. Let's move on.
Can I make some quick Reece James comments?
Please.
Yes.
I think I won't belabor any of the center back points, but I think if I had to explain why he's so high, I feel like one, readers of Overthinking Football we've been praising Reece James for at least 3 years now, and I think that some of that has maybe seeped into their brains one way, for good or for bad. Two, his per game stats are insane from last year, and yes, he did not start that many games, but when he did start, he was incredible. So I think that you see the green check mark next to his stats, and you're just like, okay. I mean, and they're overwhelmingly better than most players.
Yes.
And third, and I think we'll probably get to this later, but I also think it speaks to a general trend that I've been seeing, that defenders are what I would say finally starting to get valued closer to where they actually belong. And so I think that this is just part of an overall trend in that direction that we've sort of been seeing this year.
Yeah. Okay.
I absolutely do not want to talk about Reece James anymore, but
we're doing it.
If you or anyone who is listening has read my piece on drafting for upside, essentially drafting for first or last and not for mid-table is the title of our article in our draft kit. I co-wrote that with Draft Genie, and I had a look at some statistics, and my favorite statistic of all, quality starts for Reece James, and it is a fascinating read. And I had a good long talk with Andrew, the other part of Overthinking Football, on Twitter about this, and it does have it does throw up an interesting anomaly, shall we say, where Reece James has a wins above replacement number that is relatively low compared to other round 2 ADP players, whereas his quality starts are quite high, and that is probably due to him just bossing Q90 starts, which means that on any given game week he has had out of his 19 starts, listen to this, out of his 19 starts, he has had 10 games where he scored in the 90th percentile for defenders. 10 out of the 19. But from the other 9, he only had 2 where he reached the 50th percentile.
Yeah, very boom or bust. When it rains, it pours.
It is. It is. Now that's enough Reece James talk.
Okay, things for listeners to think about.
Things for listeners to think about. Okay, I'll go a bit lower on our ranks and highlight a few bigger discrepancies. So we have in our Draft Society consensus ranks, we have Matty Cash at 53.
Oh yeah, this is a big one.
Which is around Matt Doherty at 55, which actually the community and us agree on fully. And another defender around that rank is Joel Matip at 47 and 39. And James Tarkowski at 55 and 63. So around that area. We have Matty Cash at 53. The community has him at 84.
That's an interesting one.
Why do we think that is?
Yeah, so I think part of it has to do with, I need to check where we started him in the ranks. It could be that we started him too low in the underlying rankings and he just hasn't worked his way all the way up yet. But it could also be that because of that, because maybe we started him out around like the 90s, and there's just a lot of players that after you reach like, I don't know, the 40th ranked player, there's just a lot of players that are like kind of the same.
Yep.
And when you get them matched up in the ranker app, you're just like, I don't know. Like, these are the ones that take me the longest because I'm just like, I don't know. Like, yeah, Matty Cash is good, but like, do I really think I would rather have him than like some of these other guys that are near him? Like, I don't know, Anthony Gordon. Like, I think I want Anthony Gordon more than Matty Cash. And it's just like, but there's a lot of players that fall into this category where they're close enough. And the difference between players, I would say, from like rank 50 to rank 100, I think is not that big. That these players are all like kind of similar.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that there's a ton of variability in what their like quote unquote true ranking is, where their true ranking, maybe for Matty Cash's true ranking, is anywhere from 53 to like 84. And we just don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty, and anywhere in a pretty large range is a reasonable ranking. That's what I would say. Matty Cash doesn't really move the needle for me all that much in too many directions. He's fine. He's a fine defender, but yeah.
Some of these users might have rostered him and remember things like his 5 against Burnley, his 3.75 against Crystal Palace, his negative 1.75 against Tottenham, his 0.75 against Wolves, and his 1.75 against Arsenal. And all of these happened March 19th or later. Yeah. So, I mean, he didn't...
Recency bias.
Well, sure, but he didn't end the season well. Granted, 2 weeks before that, he had games of 18, 20, and 35.
Yeah.
So there was that.
Yeah. Recency bias. Yeah, that's a great point, Totti. I mean, I think that's another big trend you see in the consensus ranks, and the consensus ranks aren't perfect either, and people are influenced by what they've seen last. And I feel like there's a lot of recency bias in, I mean, both the Draft Society consensus ranks and the community consensus ranks, that we really have trouble stopping from latching onto the last thing that we remember from these guys. Which can really lead us to some misjudgments, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think I'd caveat, or maybe that's not the right word. I'd add this to what you said. Like, I think that's to say that players between 50 and 100 are much closer. I think it's not exactly the right word to use. I think they are closer, meaning there is a much bigger difference for people in their own personal ranks in the below 50 or above, whatever.
Meaning like they average out to be a lot closer in terms of like their draft number, because people are ranking them so like variably, like different people are valuing them so differently that they're eventually,
It doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't gonna be a lot of difference between them, or there shouldn't be. It's just that when we move down our ranks, we are moving into the territory of players we care less about, and therefore know less about, and have less informed decisions about. So I think that's one thing to do. And the other thing, which is I think really important, is to differentiate between draft ranks and rest of season projections, because there's an art and science to projecting fantasy points for the season, and we will be releasing our projections for the season ahead on the Draft Society for everyone who has subscribed to the draft kit or the Ultimate Pass. I think it is scheduled to go out during the weekend. If the person who is doing them is able to move his furniture quickly enough into his new lodgings, but that is where you might rank someone you think will score much poorly than another guy. You might rank him higher because you would rather draft him earlier. And I think rest of season projections and where you would draft players correlate much better at the top of the draft board, whereas they fall apart in the middle and at the end of the draft board, because you would, like, a great example is I think it was 2 seasons ago when they had the Copa America right before the season, and everyone was returning late from the Euros and the Copa America. Well, it may have been last season. I don't remember, but I remember being pretty certain that Divock Origi is going to start the first game of the season against Norwich for Liverpool. And I took him in round 10. And that is nowhere near his value for seasonal projections.
No.
But he did essentially win me game week 1.
Yeah?
So I think that comes to play much more when you go deeper down the ranks. And I think that's why we can see these bigger discrepancies, like Matty Cash, and the biggest one there is old buff, now newly buff.
Oh God.
Newly buff Daniel Podence, who is ranked by us at 71, but the community has him at 149. So there is a 78 point gap, or 78 position gap between the two places.
Chris, any thoughts on Totti's previous monologue?
I think that's a really good point. I think that different people have different ways that they approach the draft, and thus different ways that they approach valuations. And so, I mean, definitely some people draft for the first 5 game weeks or so, which is not a strategy I necessarily ascribe to. But I think that there's sort of 2 major camps where you have people who, I think we can all agree that the first maybe 4 rounds, there's a lot of signal in terms of who's going to be good. There's a lot of difference-making players who are going to be good in those first 4 rounds. I mean, if you look at award distribution, there's basically like maybe 30 or 40 really good players, and then there's like a big mess of players. And so basically after you reach maybe the fourth or fifth round, then it becomes, then it sort of differentiates, I think, into two sort of different camps. You sort of have camp one, which is, okay, I need to fill out a roster. Let me get guys who can fill out this roster. I need 5 defenders. I need, 6 midfielders. I need 4 forwards. I need to have that depth. And I need to get guys that are consistent producers, or at least consistent starters. And then I feel like you have the other camp that's basically saying, okay, and this is sort of the philosophy that I more or less lean into, which is, okay, the first, 5 rounds are done. I feel pretty good about my selections. And then it's just time to start throwing darts. And it's like, I want players who have high upside. I want guys who, if everything breaks right, could be like this season's Jared Bowen, for instance, or could be this season's Diogo Jota, who's not drafted as high as they should. And I think depending on which philosophy you pick is where some of these guys will fall. Because Matty Cash, to me, strikes me as more of a safe player where you take them because, I need my 4th defender, or I need my 3rd defender. And he's a, very reliable 3rd defender. He's going to play almost every week. He might not crush it all that often, but like he's got it in him occasionally. Where somebody else might be like, okay, you know what? I want Anthony Robinson instead because, he plays for Fulham, but the dude has massive potential if things fall right. And so I think because that phenomenon is more likely to happen in the later rounds, I think because of that, you do see this massive variance on how much people value different players. And I agree completely with Totti was saying that it doesn't necessarily mean that they truly are like very similar players, but it does mean that the range of valuations that you see across the community are spread really, really widely. And as a result, there can be a lot of differences in ranks between, say, our consensus ranks and the Draft Society's consensus ranks.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think Totti pretty much nailed it with his monologue. As I conclude my monologue.
Just to maybe wrap up this discussion, it is just an interesting caveat to tomorrow's unveiling of our ranks. Out of the 7 of us who have contributed to this here consensus ranks, our KPC's very own Cheeky Nando's Football Club owner Ryan Barnes is closest to the ranker-based consensus ranks, and he is actually closer to the ranker-based consensus ranks than he is to the Draft Society consensus ranks with his ranks. So that will be an interesting tint of glasses to look at tomorrow's unveiling.
That's because Brian Barnes is our sleeper agent.
Nice.
He is your sleeper agent, and he is our community liaison as well. So he does keep his fingers on the pulse of the draft community much more than any of us hope to. And the person who is furthest away from crowd consensus ranks is helper of ranker draft lad, actually. So that will be interesting to see, and I think this shows that our consensus ranks will bring something new and something and definitely a source of discussion for tomorrow and probably the upcoming few days among the community, because it will be a bit different from what it seems what the community thinks
Yeah.
where players should be taken.
Yeah, I like it. Chris, any other thoughts or any other narratives you wanted to make sure you touched on before we concluded today?
Yeah, I've mentioned defenders. I think that I love to see 3 defenders near the top 10. That's really awesome. Sort of, I feel like a vindication of us carrying the defender flag for a number of years now.
Yeah, with war and everything. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's been really cool to see. I think that the recency bias, again, I think it's interesting that United is so absent from the top of the ranks. I'm not saying go out there and take all the United assets, but I do think that because they were so poor last season, I think that people have it in their head that these assets aren't worth having. I think like Marcus Rashford is actually a really good example. He was so bad last year, but
yeah,
I mean, would anybody be shocked if he comes in this season, gets a starting role, and is basically the 3rd or 4th round forward that everyone thought he was last year? I mean, he was getting drafted in the 5th round or so with that injury that had him out for the first few months. Not necessarily advisable to have drafted him there, but I think whenever you see players that have massive valuation changes season to season, I think that you need to sort of, perk up and think about, why is that? Do I think it's due to recency bias, or is there a better reason why this player isn't worth my draft capital? So I think United falls under that category. I mean, even Jadon Sancho. I mean, Jeannie's going to enjoy hearing this. I mean, I'm not the Sancho fan that he is, but Jadon Sancho was incredible, and it's interesting to see him at he's in 31 for both of our rankings. If I get him at pick 30, I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about that. It's definitely worth the upside. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think, speaking of Sancho, it's also been interesting to see the course correction from previous years on new transfers. I feel like every year there's the conversation that, we need to temper our expectations. He's coming into a new situation, but then, Sancho goes top 5 in a lot of drafts. And I think that there's been a surprising amount of restraint on Erling Haaland. He's at 8 in both of our ranks, and I think that that's actually pretty good. It's a pretty good ranking.
And look at Nunez too, right?
Yeah, Nunez. So speaking of Nunez, a storyline that I found very interesting is the Diaz, Nunez, Jota discrepancy in ranks, which I can't quite put my finger on.
You've missed someone.
Salah?
Never
heard of him.
No. Someone else.
Bobby?
Bobby.
Oh, God. Totti, don't.
I refrain. I've used up all my tangents on Reece James. I don't know what to make of Bobby. To me, he falls in that huge swath of ranks where I just don't know what to do with him. I do think he's a good flyer later in the draft. I think that if he's hanging around too long, you should draft him. But I don't know where he fits in. But yeah, it's interesting to me to see Diaz so high, and consensus ranks he's very, very high too. Nunez, a little bit lower, and then Jota quite far down. I mean, he's 26th in the Draft Society ranks, and he's only 17th in the consensus ranks, which the Overthinking consensus ranks, which makes me happy. But I just don't know that there's that much to separate the 3. And in fact, of the 3, I think I'd least like to have Nunez. It could be I'm missing something and just regressing to the mean a little bit too much. But
no, that's exactly how Totti feels too.
Yeah, I just feel like there's been an overreaction to that signing, even though he's now around 15th. And I really don't think there's all that much to separate Diaz, Jota. I would prefer one of Diaz and Jota over Nunez, to be completely honest. But that has been an interesting thing I've seen, not specifically in our ranks, but certainly in the general community feeling, because that order of Diaz, then Nunez, then Jota has been very consistent, and I don't quite fully buy it. I think those are sort of the big takeaways I've had this thus far. It's been really cool to see the ranks develop and see them change over time. And I got to go back to the tweet that we had with Jesus and Richarlison. I love that tweet. I think it's such a cool plot and such a cool way to see how, the entire community's opinions develop and evolve with new information and how we feel about it, especially in light of just how bad ADP is. And we could have an entire another podcast about how bad and unreliable ADP is.
So true.
Which is really the number one reason to use the either your personal ranks, our consensus ranks, or the Draft Society's consensus ranks to have a baseline, because ADP is just not getting the job done. And it will mislead you, and hopefully instead it'll mislead your opponents because you're using one of our consensus ranks. But it's been really cool, and I just want to thank everyone for following along, voting. I hope you all continue to vote. I think that, to be honest, I think the ELO aspect of the ranking is the coolest part of the ranking, and so that only really matters if you continue to vote. So I really hope you do, and please reach out with any feedback, questions, whatever you have.
I love it. Yeah, well said. I don't know what I can add. Totti, any final thoughts?
If you are not familiar with where to find Overthinking Football blog or data that they have on their site for free to download and then to customize and to use, then you just open up one of my articles and I'll have a plethora of links in there for their quality stars, for their war metrics, for the site itself, for their explanations on what war is, what quality starts are, and so on and so on. So yeah, use as much resource as possible to influence your own ranks, and then use the Ranker app to actually make your own ranks.
Beautiful. Let me give a proper shout out to just in case people are wondering. So it's of course overthinkingfootball.com, and then we have ranker.overthinkingfootball.com if you want to make your own rankings. And then finally, follow them on Twitter at, this one's a little bit tougher, at OVRTHNK football, all one word. Cursed character limit. It's unfortunate.
Exactly.
Well, Chris, thank you so much, man. We appreciate it. Every time you're on, like I said, we're gonna have to get you some swag or something because, you're definitely basically a bona fide member of the podcast at this point. So we appreciate you every time.
Well, thank you guys. This is always a blast. Love coming on, chatting with you guys.
Cheers. Yeah, listeners, look out for the consensus ranks tomorrow, and I would encourage you to go over and start ranking players. Get to your 1,000. Download your rankings, your personal rankings, and see how they stack up against the quote-unquote experts at the Draft Society. And then give us a shout if you want to talk through some rankings and see why we have certain hunches and why we're thinking the way that we are, why we're thinking the way that we do. Just had a discussion today with Sean Conley, some criticism, if you will, but a great discussion. Exactly what you were talking about, Chris, with the Liverpool forward. So check that out. Love to just hash things out and talk through some things. And it's not uncommon for our minds to actually be swayed as well by some good interesting insight that people bring to the conversation. So yeah, have it out if you want to go ahead and just start a conversation on Twitter, tag us, and let us know what you think. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or constructive criticisms, we'd love to hear it. All right, this has been the Keep Ass Collective. I'll go ahead and stop blabbering on at this point. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. Community, I say it all the time, you know we love you. And for people who are drafting this weekend, it's early, but man, if you're drafting this weekend, get out there and just freaking dominate. We'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.